Hi, my name is Lydia Pretorius. I was requested by Emil Gous to develop this very short video for you on the role that disabled people organizations of persons with disabilities, have played as agents of change in recent years. And I'm going to use three examples from South Africa for this purpose under the theme Nothing About Us Without Us. The first campaign I would like to share with you to show the impact that DPOs can have and should have was the campaign that Disabled People South Africa ran in the years following the unbanning of our political organizations up to and after the first democratic elections within South Africa. So what was the context? And I think it's always important with campaigns to have context. From 1989 to 1994, we saw the unbanning of political parties in South Africa. We saw the release of Mandela and other political prisoners. We saw multi-party negotiations starting towards a new democratic South Africa. And we saw a national People Shall Govern campaign by the government in waiting. This was the context onto which Disabled People South Africa then piggybacked their campaign to secure the rights of persons with disabilities within the country. There were three main campaign messages around which the whole campaign ran. And these campaign messages really was derived from what was happening in the broader country in order to mobilize South Africans in general. The first was human rights. The second one was around disability inclusion mainstreaming, saying we don't want apartheid for persons with disabilities in the new democracy. We want inclusion. And then the third main message was around self-representation. Nothing about us without us. Main campaign activities that was undertaken was the development of the South African Disability Rights Charter 1990 to 1992 in partnership with the Lawyers for Human Rights. And really this campaign around the Charter was a campaign that derived its home from the Freedom Charter. It went around the country speaking to persons with disabilities in the remotest out corners of the country, across all impairment groups, around what they would like to see in a new South Africa, how they would like to see the Freedom Charter being interpreted. There was another activity then that was very specific negotiations with the government in waiting. Around the kind of dispensation they would like to see for the persons with disabilities in a post-apartheid South Africa. There was a number of campaigns where people went to the streets around specific demands or specific incidents that took place to which there were reactions, but all the time with those three campaign messages in mind. And in the last activity, this was all done through coalitions and cooperation with other disability and civil organizations outside of the disability sector. Again, around mobilizing people around the issues of disability. What was our results that the Disabled People South Africa achieved with their campaign? And I think the first one was to get the rights of persons with disabilities entrenched in the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. Major result. The second one was getting a government-wide disability policy approved by 1997, 3 years after democracy dawned. And this policy was really developed in partnership with persons with disabilities, taking from that Disability Rights Charter campaign what people said, putting it against the standard rules that was then the UN document, and coming up with a policy. The third major result was that we saw major representation by persons with disabilities in key institutions such as Parliament. And on the photo, I have a photo of Maria Ranto, who was our first parliamentarian with a disability, in the Human Rights Commission, in the Commission on Gender Equality, the National Youth Commission, on the SABC board, and many other institutions. So there was a concerted effort of identifying key strategic institutions, identifying activists that could represent persons with disabilities in these institutions, and then negotiating for that to happen. We also saw, as a last main result I would like to highlight, that we had an office on the status of persons with disabilities established in the presidency, initially called the Disability Program, and eventually in all 9 provinces in the offices of the premiers. They've taken on various shapes and morphed into other things, and sometimes in other locations over the years, but this was a major achievement where these offices were led by activists with disabilities to establish disability mainstreaming mechanisms within government at national as well as provincial level. What were some of the challenges that was experienced during this campaign? And I'm just going to highlight a few. The first one was disunity amongst DPOs. And I think it's really important to learn from some of our mistakes. Although there were efforts to bring everybody on board, people were at the same time fighting for their own turf and their own sunshine. And I think if there was more unity, especially post some of these achievements, we would have achieved much more. Less repetition, much more impact. There were also power struggles between organizations of and organizations for persons with disabilities, where some organizations found it very difficult to step back and let the voice of persons with disabilities themselves come to the fore. There was a significant brain drain from DPOs post-1994 with all these deployments. A lot of them were permanent employment. And just like with other civil organizations and with other labor unions, they struggled with capacity as a result of this brain drain. And then the last, I think, major challenge that the campaign as an ongoing campaign ran into was disinvestment in SA civil society post-2000, and in particular international investment played a major role in creating challenges for the campaign. The second campaign I want us to briefly look at was the South African Sign Language recognition as an official language campaign. It was run by DEFSA, the Deaf Federation of South Africa. And the context here is that the full enjoyment of human rights for deaf people is based on the recognition and respect for deaf culture and deaf identity. The South African Constitution in its preamble recognizes South African Sign Language as the language of deaf people, but it doesn't give it official status. And that without sign language, deaf people are unable to have equitable access to information, communication, services, and/or opportunities. So what were some of the activities that DEFSA, and sometimes in partnership with other deaf organizations, then embarked upon? And this comes from a submission that DEFSA made. So in 1996, they, as part of the Disability Rights Charter campaign, they, together with other organizations, really campaigned for South African Sign Language to be recognized in the Constitution as an official language. They didn't succeed in getting it recognized as an official language at the time, but it was recognized as the preferred language for deaf persons. So from 2003 to 2008, our first, that parliament that sat from in those years, by 2007, DEFSA made a first submission. They basically retreated after their defeat, getting it as a result recognized as an official language, and they then came back with a new campaign around a first submission to Parliament 2007. Parliament then recommended that discussions take place between the Pan-South African Language Board, the Department of Arts and Culture, and that they need to find solutions and work together. Parliament, Parliament that was between 2009 and 2014. DEFSA met with the Minister of Arts and Culture in 2009, the new incoming minister. In 2012, Parliament refers the recognition of sign language to a portfolio committee on social development. And by 2013, a second formal submission was made by DEFSA. Then Parliament, in the next Parliament from 2014 to 2019, there was a third submission made. The NEC of DEFSA then approved the Solidarity campaign, and very important Solidarity campaign, where they really roped in other deaf organizations as well as the disability sector broadly, and as well also then as civil society. And there were throughout 2016 a major media campaign, a public awareness campaign, with marches and petitions in all the provinces, really involving people from across all walks of life, really mass-based solidarity focus. End of 2016, they again met with parliamentary legal advisors around the official recognition, and then in 2017, the NCOP, National Council of Provinces, which is one of the houses of parliament, approved the amendment of the constitution, and a few weeks later the National Assembly, the other house, approved it. But before this could be taken to the joint sitting, and before it could be changed into a constitutional amendment, Parliament adjourned for elections. So in 2020, in the State of the Nation address, President Ramaphosa supported and committed that government will work with Parliament in getting South African Sign Language recognized as a 12th official language. In May 2020, as I said, Parliament then adjourns for elections, and lobbying has continued. DEFSA continues to engage with Parliament as the body who is responsible for the amendment of the Constitution, but also continuing to seek solidarity with other organizations. The third campaign that I want to just briefly touch on, it's a very recent campaign, and that is around legalizing Braille access. And it's a campaign that's run by Blind SA. In the context here is the convention talks about recognition of Braille, dealing with copyright issues. The South African Disability Policy speaks to this. The Marrakesh Treaty speaks to this. It's the international instrument for this. And then the South African Copyright and Intellectual Property Rights legislation, that's a barrier to this. So that's the context of this campaign. What were the campaign activities? First of all, Blind SA and its leadership and other blind organizations in the country participated in the development of the Marrakesh Treaty. Secondly, they then mobilized for ratification of the treaty within South Africa. When that didn't work, they then made submissions to Parliament during the amendment of the old Copyright Act. They were happy with what they got into the Act. They then petitioned President Ramaphosa, who was delaying signing off on the Act and enacting the Act. And at that point, it was referred back to Parliament as possibly unconstitutional on other clauses. Government has continued to give mixed messages around ratification of the Marrakesh Treaty, and that's when Blind SA stepped up their public awareness campaign and recently decided to move into litigation to get the right to Braille in a legal manner, access to Braille in a legal manner approved. And I'm going to show you a very short video which really captures the essence of their campaign. It's one of their campaign videos.
It was a revolution. Some call it a struggle. I paid a heavy price. Our goal was equality. Some say we won the war. I say we are still fighting a book famine and apartheid copyright laws that refuse to transform. If that is what human rights looks like, I can't see it.
I hope and trust that you found this interesting and helpful in knowing that campaigns can be very successful if led by DPOs, that DPOs have a responsibility to ensure that they make impact and that their lobbying is also backed up by clearly well-defined campaigns that can be sustained and that knocks on the right doors for the right issues. Hope you found this useful.